Galbrena came out yesterday, and despite just how complicated her combos could be, she ended up being a basic attack spammer. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit more in detail. Some characters feel a lot more one-dimensional than others, and it really feels like sometimes Kuro is trying to dumb down the game a bit. And obviously, since Galbrena is the one who inspired the topic, I want to talk about her first. Galbrena is a character that had a lot of potential for incredibly cool combos. She has some things we've never seen before in a character. For example, her held aerial attack functions a bit like Dante's Rainstorm from Devil May Cry, and could have really cool combo potential. Additionally, her skill sends her into the air, which would allow for a good synergy between these two abilities. Additionally, Galbrena has both an enhanced heavy attack and an enhanced basic attack in her forte mode, and her heavy attack is a string of heavy attacks. It really feels like this character should have the ability to come up with some incredibly elaborate combos to build up forte as fast as possible, and then abuse that forte incredibly well. But now that we have our hands on her, in practice that's not really the case. The fastest way to build up her forte? Just spam basic attacks. The most optimal way to spend that forte? Just spam basic attacks. The only real quote-unquote complexity that she has in her kit is that you're able to animation cancel the transition to use your liberation as early as possible, and the fact that she has a sort of special dodge you can use to get one extra stack over inherent skill. But outside of this, you're kinda just spamming your basics and using your skill to enter forte mode. There really isn't much interesting to this character when it comes to her optimal combo, and I think that's an incredible shame. One of my favorite pastimes in Wuthering Waves is trying to play the character as optimally as possible. Trying to find swap cancel windows where the sun doesn't shine, and trying to just make the most out of my character. But Galbrena, unfortunately, doesn't really have anything like this in her kit. It really feels like that from when you start reading what her kit is. She has a ton of complexity and combos to exploit, but she doesn't. And that was really upsetting to me, and it caused me to make this video. It feels like some characters are just way too easy to play, and while that isn't really a bad thing for 90% of the community, that can be really annoying for a player like me who loves to optimize their character as much as possible. So I wanted to talk a bit about some characters that have quote-unquote simple playstyles, and then some characters who are a lot more dynamic with their rotation. So first of all, when it comes to characters that are simple to play, I think the number one example of this has to be Carlotta. Carlotta is honestly revered for just how simple she is to play. It's a big positive for a lot of people. And, well, I can't blame them, but I'm a very different individual. Carlotta is an incredibly simple character to play because there is only one way to play the character. Carlotta has one rotation, and if you decide to deviate a little bit from this rotation, well, let's just say you're not doing something correct, and there will be something in your rotation that goes wrong. You start off with 30 substance, use your intro skill, go double skill, then you plunge, use your forte heavy, use your ultimate, finish that off, and then you do another double skill and you swap off. That is the Carlotta rotation. That's the only way to play the character. The second you start deviating, you're gonna start losing out on either a ton of damage or a ton of time. It's really no stretch to say that Carlotta has one playstyle, and if you don't like that run rotation, there's nothing else you can do with her. You might be able to buffer some animations, but really, there's not much you can do with the character. If you combine all of the possible Carlotta tech, I fully believe that you're not even gonna be able to save even a quarter of a second. This character's rigid playstyle really comes from the way her kit was designed, because her ultimate gets rid of all substance, but her intro skill instantly gives her substance anyway. This forces you into a rotation where you have to build up substance at the beginning, then use your forte heavy, and then use your liberation. And after that, you almost ran out of your outro skill buff, so there's not much you can do after that anyway. If Carlotta didn't have as rigid of a rotation, and she was in fact capable of using her liberation earlier on, you'd be able to benefit more from her actual set. Frosty Resolve gives you skill damage bonus whenever a liberation is cast. And obviously this is meant for Carlotta's Liberation, because it counts as casting your Liberation 6 times, because each death knell also counts as a Liberation cast. But because of the mechanics of Carlotta's Substance, you are forced to use this one specific rotation and aren't able to optimize in any way. And that brings me to the more detailed and complex character of the 2.x era, being, sadly, Carlotta. I don't like praising this character, I don't like Carlotta at all, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. Carlotta has one of the more dynamic playstyles that we've seen in the current era. Sure, in her Carlotta form, it's kinda just the same thing over and over again, where because you use your intro skill, you already have one of her swords, so all you need to do is use her skill, 4th basic, and her plunge. And well, you already start on your 2nd basic after your intro, so you're just gonna finish your basic string, and then use your skill, which automatically brings you into the air, and then you plunge. That part's always gonna stay the same. But what's interesting here is when you transform into Fleurdelys, because Fleurdelys has a ton of possible combos, and a ton of attacks that lead into each other. Fleurdelys has an attack for when you jump. After using your 3rd aerial attack, you automatically begin on your 3rd grounded attack. Same thing for the 2nd skill. The 1st skill automatically sends you into the air. Fleurdelys has a ton of possible combos that she's able to exploit, which means that there is a ton of variation you can have within your Fleurdelys combo. Obviously, you can have the beginner combo, and the better and more comfortable you get with the character, the better your Fleurdelys combos are going to become. It really feels like Fleurdelys as a character complements your experimentation. The more you play the character, the more you get comfortable with the combos, and the more crazy things and faster things you're able to pull off. Carlotta respects how much you're practicing, and she respects the skill that you're building up the more you play with her and get comfortable with her, which is what I like to see. I want to see a character that rewards you for learning the combos and getting new crazy ideas. So, as much as I hate to say it, good job, Carlotta. You did something right for once. Now to talk about a more simple character. And as much as I hate to say it, I believe that Phoebe falls under this category. Phoebe is a different kind of easy to use compared to Carlotta. Where Carlotta forced you into a singular rotation because she doesn't have any other options due to her forte mechanics, Phoebe just straight up holds your hand. Like, there is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Phoebe just holds your hand whenever you're trying to play the character. There really is no other way to go around it when playing her. You activate her forte, you use her skill whenever convenient, you do 3 basic attacks, Star Flash until your forte expires. You can use your Liberation whenever convenient, but the earlier the better. The best time to use it would be right after casting her forte heavy attack or forte skill, you know, the one to activate either her Absolution or Confession, but it really doesn't matter when you time it. So yeah, this character is the definition of simple. Literally, you just activate the forte, 3 basics, heavy, repeat until you're finished. That is the definition of a hand-holding character. Is there any sort of other way to trigger Star Flash, maybe? Yeah, at S6, maybe, if when you use your skill. Maybe this could be cool. Maybe Phoebe has some kind of use for her aerial attack. No. Maybe her aerial heavy attack? No. Oh, she has a teleport in her kit. Can you use that? No, because you're just gonna stand in the skill ring anyway, because you're most likely gonna be close enough to the enemy to do so. Now, this is not to say that Phoebe has literally 0 complexity in her kit. You are able to dash cancel her 3rd basic attack basically instantly after using it. When you stand in her ring, you're still gonna get all the damage from that 3rd basic. So that's cool, that's some kind of tech at least. And she's able to cancel the animation of her forte heavy attack or forte skill, which is nice, there's at least a little bit of depth there. But it's undeniable that Phoebe holds your hand when you play her. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that I did end up getting her S6, because S6 adds more complexity to her gameplay because you get to trigger 2 extra Star Flashes in your DPS rotation for your skill casts, and because you're getting so much damage out of your other sequences, your gameplay ends up revolving around timing your nukes to use them as efficiently as possible, to make sure you can wipe waves with just 1 heavy attack while saving as much damage as possible for the next wave, which I do enjoy. But an S0 Phoebe? That's just an incredibly brain-dead character. And then I want to talk about one more character when it comes to characters that have more depth to their gameplay. And you're gonna be a little bit surprised, but the character I'm gonna talk about here is Camellya. Camellya actually has some of the most amount of depth in her gameplay out of any character in the entire game. Because while some people know that you are in fact still capable of using Camellya's white hair mode, most people just kinda stick to the spin to win playstyle. But that really isn't all that Camellya can do. She has two separate rotations, one that is incredibly easy to use and works incredibly well for AoE, and then there's Camellya's white hair rotation, which uses a ton of different aspects from her kit. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you what to do in the red hair rotation. You just use your skill, use your ultimate, and then you go spin to win, use your forte skill ephemeral whenever available. It's a really easy rotation. But Camellya has so many other mechanics in her kit that she's capable of using. For example, in her skill she has a jump, which cancels her red hair mode, which we actually end up using in the white hair rotation. Because in the white hair rotation, we want to use Camellya's regular basic attacks, as they actually have a higher damage output in single target scenarios. Which means that you do actually end up having complexity with your character, and this complexity is in fact worth using. It's not like Galbrena where you could come up with combos, but they're not worth using. No, the white hair combo is actually optimal for boss scenarios, which means that Camellya has a ton more depth than characters like Phoebe or Carlotta or even Galbrena. But that's just my opinion on the matter. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, join my Discord, which is linked in the description. If you just want to see more of me, check out my second channel, which is also linked in the description. I don't post very consistently, but when I do post, it's kinda just whatever I feel like posting. But that'll be all from me. Peace.